All right, we're ready to begin chapter 16. This is the first part. We'll be in chapter 16 next week as well. This will be the Qal Imperfect Weak Verbs. We spent a couple of weeks working on weak verbs for chapter 15. I'm sorry, 14. That would have been the Qal Perfect. Now we're doing the same thing for the imperfect. So there's really not much new in this one. It's all very similar to what we looked at before. So we'll start off with Hebrew insights. Actually, this is going to be more of a modern Hebrew type thing, probably, and then go over the workbook and translations, and then we'll look at the Qal Imperfect Weak Verbs and vocabulary. The first half of it, anyway. So, for more like modern phrases, we'll look at Hanukkah, Hanukkah, Hanukkah. It's have the full spelling right here, or it's spelled defectively, which is still pronounced Hanukkah. We just have this kibbutz here instead of the shurik over here. But it's pronounced the same way. And the reason why I'm doing this is because this year it came later. With the way they handle leap months on the Hebrew calendar, it moved things back farther. And so this was a little unusual in that Hanukkah started on the 25th, the evening of the 25th, our Christmas. It's always on the 25th of Kislev. So I have the month here. It's always on the 25th. I remember there was a story or a joke about a couple of Jewish people talking about, well, I wonder what day Hanukkah will be on. It's the 25th of Kislev. It's always the 25th of Kislev because it doesn't change on the Hebrew calendar, but on the Gregorian calendar, it moves around. But this year it was a little later than normal. It began at sunset on Christmas Day last year now. And it actually didn't end until just last Thursday at evening, so January 2nd. So that was a little unusual too, that it crossed over on the Gregorian calendar in both 2024, 2025. So that's why I'm bringing it up now, because we just came through it. It commemorates the day the Jews reconquered Jerusalem and the temple and had to cleanse it from the pig sacrificing Greeks. And it is celebrated by lighting candles and eating donuts. The greeting is Happy Feast, Chag Sameach, which is the same way that we would greet like at a Feast of Booths or Sukkot. Chag Sameach. Chag is feast, and Sameach is happy or joy. And so you're just wishing them a happy feast when you say Chag Sameach. Now, one of the things they have during Hanukkah is dreidels, which is not actually Hebrew. That's a Yiddish word, and it's a little top. And there's two kinds of dreidels. Each dreidel has it's square shaped, and it has four letters on it. It'll either have a Nun, Gimel, Pei, Sheen, or it'll have, instead of a Sheen, it'll have a Pei. That's right here. And it stands for Nace, so a wonder or a miracle. Gadol, a great one, so a great miracle. He was, or it happened. Sham, there. And so when you're not in Israel, like if somebody had dreidels here in the U.S., those are the ones you'd have. It would have the sheen because that means Sham. It stands for Sham, which is there. A great miracle happened or was there. But when you're in Israel, or specifically Jerusalem, they have the Pei because that's Po. Po is here. It's still a wonder or a miracle, a great one. It was here. And so that's the meanings of the letters on the dreidels. I have a picture here, and you see the Pei over here on the one on the right. That doesn't show up very well. If I make my circle bigger, it would maybe. see the pay over here and the sheen over the one on the left. And any other letters are, some of them are repeated, but that's what a dreidel looks like, and that's what those letters mean. Now, Hanukkah is the Hebrew word is used 8 times in the Hebrew scriptures. It's used in the dedication of the tabernacle. It's used in the dedication of the temple. It's used in a few other places. But I have a list there. And this is also called the Feast of the Dedication. That's what Hanukkah is, the dedication, because they rededicated the temple and the altar and everything when this whole thing started. That's what they're doing, dedication. Jesus celebrated it in John 10:22. He was at the Feast of Dedication. Oh, you might be wondering, I didn't talk about it. The miracle that happened was that they lit the lamps, and they didn't have very much, but the celebration was for 8 days. And even though they only had maybe a day's worth or so, they were able to, it stretched out. That was the miracle, that the oil stretched out. The lights were able to shine through the whole celebration there. And since oh, I didn't mention that. That's somewhere up here. Yeah, it was clear back here on the first one. It's also called Chag HaOrim, the Feast of Lights, the Feast of Lights. And that's why it's the temple, the lights in the temple, the oil, that was the part of the miracle. That's why they call it Feast of Lights. And so Jesus is the true light who came into the world, and he's we celebrate him. And it's just interesting that this year, or well, last year now, in the last couple of weeks, it actually started on Christmas Day, when we celebrate the true light coming into the world. But now we are the temple, and we should also dedicate ourselves to be wholly devoted to Jesus. Anyway, a little bit of information about Hanukkah. All right, let's move on to the workbook. And so we'll go over chapter 15. Did anybody have any questions on chapter 15 in the workbook? Okay, let's go over the translation. That starts on page 59. I think that's all there is. I don't think it goes to the next page. No, that's all. So we have 6 on page 59. First one from Psalm 111:5. Yizkor, he will remember. And there we see the yod preformative there. That's third masculine singular for the imperfect. Let's see. Qal Imperfect, third person masculine singular. He will remember. To forever, or for forever. Rito, the covenant of him. So he will remember his covenant forever. Number 2, the righteous. Notice the very first thing there is the definite direct object marker. So it's putting the direct object first. A lot of times we'll see maybe a prepositional phrase or a verb before the subject. But in this case, we don't have the subject till the very end. This comes from Ecclesiastes 3:17. And it starts off saying the righteous, but this is the direct object, the righteous. And we have another definite direct object marker with the vav conjunction there. And so the righteous and the wicked ones. So the righteous ones and the wicked ones. And then we finally come to our verb, he will judge, yishpot. Again, we see that yod preformative, that's third masculine singular. He will judge. And then finally the subject, God. So why do we have this order? Because it is emphasizing it's the righteous ones and the wicked ones he will judge, that God will judge. Number 3 comes from Jeremiah 19:11. Thus he said, Yahweh of hosts. And then thus, but that starts the quote. So we have kaka, kacha. Thus, I will break. See that Aleph preformative there? That's the first person singular, common singular. I will break, or I will make broken, or I will shatter. And then we have the direct object, the people, this one. So this people, and the city, this one. So thus Yahweh said, Yahweh of hosts said, thus I will break the people, this people, and this city. All right. Number 4 from Exodus 15:18. Now we have a different type of emphasis. We have Yahweh as the first word, and that is being brought forward for emphasis as well. Now we're emphasizing who's doing it. Normally we'd get the verb first, but we have Yahweh, the subject first. So Yahweh, he will reign. It's he will reign because we have the yod preformative. Again, that's third masculine singular. And melech there it's melok. It's a verb, not a noun. It's not king. So Yahweh, he will reign forever and ever. Number 5 from Ezekiel 43:7. I will dwell. So again, since this is an imperfect, we have that Aleph preformative, put it in the future. I will dwell, Sham, there. That's the same word that we saw just a bit ago, talking about Hanukkah. I will dwell there in the midst of the sons of Israel forever. And we see a construct here, because I said in the midst, but you'll notice there's no the there. But Israel is the final word of the construct chain. That's a name, and so the whole construct chain becomes definite. So I will dwell there in the midst of the sons of Israel. That's those 3 words: Betok, B'nai, Yisrael. That's our construct chain. Number 6 comes from Jeremiah 31:33. Because this, and we're going to have to insert a to be verb. It's a verbless clause here. Because this is, we'll insert is, the covenant which I will cut. Notice again, the Aleph preformative on karat means to cut. This echrot, I will cut. So since it's imperfect, we're going to give it a future tense in English. This is because this is the covenant which I will cut with the house of Israel. And again, we don't have the on house, but it's in construct with the name Yisrael. And so we're going to say the house of Israel. After the days, those. A declaration of Yahweh. I gave, but we're probably going to say put, or I will put. Would also work, even though it's Natan. We normally think of give, but sometimes Natan is used for putting. And I will put the law of me in the midst of them. So I'll go back and just kind of hit the whole thing. I broke that up with comments. But because this is the covenant which I will cut with the house of Israel after those days, a declaration of Yahweh. I will give, or I will put the law of me in the midst of them. Okay, any questions on the translations? Right. Then we'll start on chapter 16a, we'll start chapter 16, but this is going to be A. We're going to do this over 2 weeks. It's too much to put into 1 hour. And so we'll be looking at Qal Imperfect Weak Verbs. We've looked at weak verbs before. This is not new. We looked at weak verbs for the Qal Perfect. And actually, we're going to be doing this a number of times. As we get into the derived stems, every other chapter is going to be on weak verbs. For instance, when we do Nephal, we'll start the Nephal derived stem in chapter 24. That's going to be strong verbs, but then chapter 25 is going to be the Nephal weak verbs. And then chapter 27 is going to be the Hefil weak verbs. And then chapter 29 is going to be the Hofal weak verbs. And then chapter 31 is the Pal, weak verbs. Chapter 33 is going to be the Pual, weak verbs, and then the Hepalel, weak verbs, for chapter 35. And so we're going to be seeing this. If we go through this and you're going, this is just too much. I'm not sure I can remember all this. I'm not sure that I'm going to get all this. It's really not going to be a problem for you because we're going to be going over these things a number of times. And what makes a word weak in the call is going to make the word weak in a PAL or any of the other drive stems. And actually, a lot of this information we studied earlier when we were looking at rules for the schwa and pronunciation rules, the Dagesh rules, and talked about the gutturals and all that. There's a lot of this is stuff that we've already covered in previous chapters, and so it's mostly a review. This is about the time that things start getting. When I learned Hebrew, the guy taught me Hebrew said, when you learn Hebrew, you start off crying and end up laughing. You start off crying because there's just a lot of work to getting the alphabet and the vowels and the schwa and the dageshes and learning about the gutturals and pronunciation rules and all that kind of thing. And then you have pronominal suffixes, and then you have the Qal perfect paradigm and the Qal imperfect paradigm. And there's a lot of memorization. But we're getting to the place where most of this stuff is just going to be reviewed every time with other verb stems. And it's and so you start laughing because it's not, you don't have to rememorize everything. Everything carries over. All you have to do is remember variations. So the paradigm is the same. We're going to do a review of the paradigm. When we say Qal imperfect, we're saying with Qal, it's indicating that this is an active simple action, and imperfect is telling us it's an incomplete action. It's not a tense. It's telling us what kind of action it is. A Qal perfect is complete action. Qal imperfect is incomplete. And so instead of katal, which would be perfect, we have yiktol. Yiktol means he will kill. We use a we use a future tense for the imperfect. He will kill. And we say he will kill because this yod on the front is our preformative for third masculine singular. Okay, and I kind of said that already. Hebrew conjugations are not tenses. They indicate aspect. Aspect is the type of action. Is it a completed action? Is it an ongoing or a repeated action? That's what we're looking at here. Imperfect verbs are normally translated into English or the future tense, except for when it's in like yiktol, he will kill, except for when we're looking into when it has a Vav consecutive, and that's in the next chapter, but that's going to be 2 weeks before we look at that. So let's review the Qal imperfect strong verb paradigm. This was in chapter 15, but it's necessary to have it memorized. This is the way it is in the book, in the third, second, first person sequence. And I struggled with that. If you can memorize it that way and that works for you, that is fine. You go ahead and do that. But for me, I had to rearrange it, and this made it a lot easier for me to memorize. So let's go through this one. So we'll just go ahead and read them. Ektol, tiktol, tiktali, yiktol, tiktol, niktol, tiktalu, tiktolna, yiktalu, tiktolna. Notice every one of them has a preformative on the front. Half of them have sufflamatives. Most of the sufflamatives are in the plural. Those don't change. We're going to be looking at those in all these different stems. This is why you can, once you have this memorized, then you can start laughing because you're going to see this over and over again, and these don't change. The Qal imperfect strong verb paradigm must be memorized. All imperfect verbs and the drive stems, all the ones I mentioned earlier, nifal, hefil, hofil, pio, pual, heatpalel, and others. Those are the major ones that we'll be studying. They all use these same preformatives and sufflamatives. So once you have them memorized, you don't have to memorize paradigms in all these other verb stems. So learning objectives today, we want to be able to identify imperfect weak verbs. This will be, again, mostly review. We want to be able to recognize Qal Imperfect one guttural verbs and then one aleph verbs. You go, well, wait a minute, aleph is a guttural. Yeah, that's true. It's technically one guttural, but it has special consideration. So we're going to look at that separately. And then we're going to look at the two guttural and the three chet ayin verbs. And then finally, we'll look at the three aleph verbs. And that's all the farther we're going to get today. And again, you can memorize, all of these different forms, but if you just learn the rules and recognize the forms, you don't have to memorize everything. It's everything's following a pattern here. So it's going to primarily be a review. We've looked at all these things in the past, and we'll be looking at them again in the future. So almost everything we do will be applying things we've already learned, which is the strong verb paradigm that we just covered, the imperfect strong verb paradigm. Identifying weak verbs, that's what we're going to look in here. We'll look at here now. And then syllabification rules from chapter 3 and how those things come into play. The main goal, there's a lot of details, and we're going to talk about, well, this vowel changes to this vowel, or this schwa changes to this vowel, or that sort of thing. And you can go, oh, this is so overwhelming. This makes my head spin. I'm not going to remember it all. Well, don't fret it. Don't worry about it. The main goal is recognition of the forms. You need to be able to parse them. And here, it's like Qal Imperfect, third person, masculine, singular type of thing, plus what the word comes from. You have to be able to recognize the word. The main goal is recognizing it. You don't have to remember every single thing every single change that takes place. You just need to be able to look at the word, know what the word is, and know, is it perfect? Is it imperfect? Is it first, second, third person? Is it masculine? Is it feminine? Is it common? Is it singular? Is it plural? That's what you're looking for. You don't have to remember every single thing we're covering. We're going to be looking at details. Don't let them overwhelm you. You can read Hebrew without remembering all these details. I hope that's a little comforting to you. So looking at weak verbs, we can have weak consonants in the first position. That's a guttural. That's a one guttural. We have a two guttural here. We have a three aleph here. We have a three hey and a one guttural here. That's a doubly weak verb, which we've looked at all this before. All of this is we've seen all these before. What do we know about these letters? We know that a yod, a vav, a nun, and a hey like to drop out, just like that. That's what happens. Okay, so that's what makes verbs weak. Now we want to look at the imperfect one guttural verbs. So one guttural, the one meaning the first root position letter. So let's look at the chart on page 164. At the bottom of the page, 16.2, we have a couple of different, they list three different one guttural types. I'm going to split those up a little differently, though, and we can explain why. Right now, let's just look at guttural type 1, one guttural type 1, one guttural type 2. Now, this first row is Kazakh. Kazakh means strong, but these are verbs, and so it could be that somebody was strong, but it also could be the word is often used to somebody, like if they seized somebody. That's what we'd have here is he seized, she seized, you seized, etc. So as you go down through here, it's like just on the first row, 3MS. Now on the far right-hand side, you have the strong paradigm that we memorized. And we see that we have, for the 3MS, we have that yod preformative. But as you look at all the other columns, and we can even look at the type 3 as well, we still have that yod preformative. It doesn't go away. It doesn't change. The 3FS, we have a tav preformative. And you look all the way across, and it's still there, that tav preformative. A vowel changes, that's not a big deal. We'll talk about it, but the main thing is that you recognize that that is a preformative. The same way with the 2MS. Those are the same form. You have to go by context to know whether it's a 3FS or a 2MS. The next one down, 2FS, we see a tav preformative, and we see a hirik yod subformative. And you look all the way across, and you have both the preformative and the subformative all the way across. The 1CS, we have the aleph preformative, no subformative, and that is also the same all the way across. The third masculine plural, we see a yod preformative and a shurik subformative, and you see that in every one of the columns. It doesn't change. Then the third feminine plural, and if we jump down to the second feminine plural, they also are the same form. We have a tav preformative and a na subformative, and that's the true all the way across on both of those lines. The second masculine plural, we have a tav preformative and a shurik subformative. And then for the first person common plural, we have the noon preformative. So those are very consistent. So I told you the first column, if you wanted to write that in or something that had to do with maybe seizing, he seized, she seized, you seized, I seized, etc. The second column is referring to standing, a mode. A mode is to, so via mode is and he stood. Or not and he stood. I put a vav consecutive on it. I'm sorry. It's just he will stand. Ya'amod, he will stand. And then the third column is to speak or to say something. So he said, she said, you said, or I'm sorry, these are imperfects. He will say, she will say, you will say, but it has to do with speaking. And then, of course, the last column has to do with killing, drilling by killing. That's the form we learned. All right, we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail as far as type 1 and 2 are concerned. Type 3, we're going to save that. So we're going to look at the first two types of one gutturals. The third type is a one aleph, and that deserves separate attention. So looking at type 1, so we have the yiktol, he will kill, at the top in black, and then in the blue letters underneath, we see what's written here in the book for the third masculine singular, echazak, yechazak. So what do we see? It's a one guttural vowel, is an E vowel. It's a reduced segol, okay? And vowels of one gutturals and preformatives, usually the vowels of the one gutturals and the vowels of the preformatives usually correspond. And so we've seen this mirroring before. This is not new to us. The guttural takes a reduced segol, the preformative takes a segol, and so they match. Like I say, we've seen this before. We're going to see more of this again later. And then the stem vowel is an A vowel. So we have the patak under the zayin there. The form that we memorized for the strong verb yiktol, it's a O vowel as opposed to the yekazak, the patak A vowel there. Okay, type 2. Again, we have yiktol. This is again third masculine singular. That's the strong. And then we have ya'amod. That's he will stand. All right, we talked about that again. This is coming from the second column. So what we have, that's guttural consonants prefer A-type vowels. And that's what we have. We have reduced patak there under the ayin. So that's not unexpected. And then again, it mirrors the one guttural vowel under the preformative. And so we have a reduced patak, and under the preformative, we have a patak. But again, it's the main thing here is what we see. We see the root and we see this 3ms preformative. That's what you're looking for. Recognize the word and then look for the preformatives. And if there's a subformative on the back, that's what we're looking for. We want to recognize it. Now, this was what we looked at is the third masculine singular. Now we're going to look at the first person common singular, and we have the Aleph preformative. Okay, and we've said it prefers A-type vowels, but in this case we don't. Now we've got a reduced segol and a segol, but notice that they still mirror each other there, or the vowel in the preformative mirrors the reduced vowel under the guttural. So it prefers A-type vowels, but it, like the old song said, you can't always get what you want. So, or you don't always, I don't remember. It wasn't a high song on my list, but, and then the vowel under the first guttural and the vowel under the preformative usually correspond or mirror each other. And that's what we see there too. All right, so that pretty much covers the one gutturals, except for the one alephs. Now we're going to talk about the one alephs because there's actually two types. They list on page 164 type 3. That's the first type of the one alephs. However, when you go to the next page, 165, they don't list them out. But we have under 16.3, we have number 3 and number 4. Number 3 is referring to the type 3 on the previous page. Number 4 is not given to us in a chart form, but we're going to talk about the differences. So that's why we're going to separate this out. So we're going to look at the one alephs, which is the type 3. This is the one in the chart on page 164. We'll look at those first. So we have Yiktol, he will kill, and then we have Yomar. Yomar, he will say. He will say. The preformative vowel is an O vowel. This is one of the unique things about the one alephs. Okay, so we have the O vowel. And the stem vowel is an A vowel. And when you look down through the chart on page 164, and you'll see that O vowel all the way down through there, all the way down. And when you look down through the chart, you'll see that patak there. Sometimes it's a shva, but when it's not a shva, it is a patak. And so it's, again, pretty consistent. And also, as I said earlier, you're looking for what is the word and what is the preformative and what are the subformatives. And we don't have any of those over here. We do have preformatives, and this, again, the third masculine singular. Preformative. He will kill, he will say. Okay. So looking at type 4, which we don't have in the chart, I have it in a chart, and you'll be able to just maybe screenshot it or something once it comes up here. It's a few slides down, but the information is coming from 16.3.4 on page 165. So we have Yiktol again, he will kill. And now we have Ye'esor. Ye'esor. That means to bind or tie. It can even be used to saddle a donkey or something because you're binding the saddle on the donkey. It makes sense that they would do that. Ye'esor. And so he will bind. And that's in the left column. In the right column, we have the plural. Here again, we're looking at the word. What is it? We recognize it. He will kill, he will bind. We know it's he because it's the third masculine singular. But now when we look at this side, we have the preformatives. You say, well, that's third masculine singular. Well, it is third, it is masculine, but we have subformatives as well. This is third masculine plural. Both of these are third masculine plural. So they will kill and they will bind. They will bind. All right, let's get rid of some of this. All right. So that's what we're looking at. So again, the goal is recognition. You don't have to remember every single little vowel change. You can read Hebrew without having that. It's nice to be able to figure that sort of thing out, but to read Hebrew, this isn't the hottest iron in the fire. The hottest iron in the fire is recognizing the words, as I said, recognizing the preformatives, recognizing the subformatives. That's the hottest iron in the fire. So the stem vowel is the same as the Qal Imperfect strong. And so we see the O vowel there in the singulars, third masculine singulars. We also see it in the schwas of the plurals, third masculine plurals. So those are the same. Vowels with subformatives that begin with a vowel have subformatives. Forms with subformatives that begin with a vowel have an A vowel with the one aleph. And so here we have a one aleph right there. We have a preformative. We have the subformative. The subformative is a vowel. And so we have an A vowel, that patak there. All right. And whenever we look at if we don't have a vowel subformative, like on the singular side, we don't have anything there, well, then it's an E vowel. And that's what we have. It's a reduced segol, and it gets mirrored under the preformative with a segol. Okay, so none of this is hard. It's still easy to look at that and say, I know what that is. That is third masculine plural. And the asar is to bind, and this is the they will bind, or they will kill. Okay. Here's the chart I said was coming. So I have the type 3. This matches, well, it almost matches the chart on page 164. I say it almost matches because, yes, again, I went to first, second, and third person person number order here. So we got the 1, 2, 3 singular and 1, 2, 3 plural sequence. But as far as the content of the threes, it is the same as what's in the book. And then the fours, I illustrated it using the same word to bind there. And I'm going to take these back off again in case somebody wants to screenshot it. You can catch that. And of course, we have the strong, what we memorized, ektol, tiktol, tiktali, yiktol, tiktol, niktol, tiktalu, tiktolna, yiktalu, tiktolna. That's all the same. What we memorized is on the right. So that chart is there for you to use if you want to screenshot it and print it or something, put it in your book there because they don't have that. The type 3 is listed on 164. The type 4 is from 16.3.4 on page 165. And they resemble types 1 and 2. So we will move on from 1 aleph to the 2 guttural and the 3 chet ayin verbs. Okay, we have a chart on page 166. And once again, let's start off with the first column, 2 guttural column, the bachar. Bachar means to choose. So this is he chose, she chose, you chose, etc. The second column is shalach, which means to send. And so that's he sent, she sent, you sent, etc. And the third column is matzah, and that means to find. And so this is he will find, she will find, you will find, etc. Okay, so those are what they mean. And then the last column is our drilling by killing strong paradigm that we have learned. But if you look all the way across again, you see on the first row, third masculine singular, all of them have the yod preformatives. 3FS, all of them have the top preformatives. The 2MS, all of them have the top preformatives. 2FS, all of them have the top preformative and the Hurric yod subformative. And I don't have to go through all of these, but notice that once you've learned the paradigm, it works on all of these, even in the weak verbs, even the different kinds of weak verbs. Two gutturals, two rules. Guttural consonants prefer A-type vowels. We've said this over and over again. I will continue to say it all over and over again, and you'll just learn it through osmosis. This isn't something you have to, I need to write this down to make sure I remember it. You're going to hear it over and over again. And gutturals cannot take a vocal schwa. Those are the two big rules you have to remember when it comes to gutturals and weak verbs. Gutturals prefer A-type vowels, and gutturals cannot take vocal schwas, but they prefer the reduced A vowel. So we'll look at some examples here. So we have the top one is yitol. Again, he will kill. We see the yod preformative, third masculine singular. But the second word now is yivkar. Yivkar, he will choose. He will choose. And we notice that the A vowel, we have a guttural there, and it has a patak instead of the holum there. It's red now. Instead of the holum vowel, we have the patak. So there's your big difference. If you don't remember it, the main thing, let's go back to that. The main thing, you're looking for the word. What's the word? You're looking for preformatives. You're looking for subformatives. That's the main thing. Okay, and then, excuse me, the second rule, gutturals cannot take a vocal schwa, but prefer the reduced A vowel. So here we have the plural form, third. Okay, we're going to look and see. Here's the words, kill, choose. We have the preformative. And you say, well, it's third masculine, except we have a subformative, so it's going to be third masculine plural. So it's going to be he will, or they will kill, and they will choose. That's what we're looking at here. So gutturals cannot take the vocal schwa. Yik talu. Here's our vocal schwa right here, which when you have two schwas in a row, the second one is the vocal, the first one's silent. Okay, so that's the vocal schwa. But now we have in this root 2 position, we have a guttural. And the guttural is going to prefer a reduced A vowel, and that's what we have. We have a reduced patak there. So they will choose. And instead of the, and you know, already said that, instead of the vocal schwa, we get the reduced patak, reduced A vowel. Okay, moving on to the chet ayin, 3 chet ayin, which is in the second column, still on page 166. We only have one rule. Gutturals prefer A-type vowels. Okay, that's the same rule we had just a little bit ago. And so here we have yiktol, he will kill. That's the strong verb. And we have yishlach. When we look at the word, we're looking for what the word is. Shalach means to send. We look for the preformatives, we look for subformatives. There are none, so we know this is third masculine singular. So he will kill and he will send. That's what we're looking at. And we have a guttural at the end, a 3 chet, and so it changes the vowel to from the holum at the top, it's red now, to the patak under the lamed there, yishlach, he will send. Again, you don't have to remember all these vowel changes. You're looking at the root, what is the word, and you're looking for preformatives and subformatives. And then finally, we'll look at the 3 alepphs. So the 3 aleph is also on page 166. Differences between the Qal imperfect strong and the 3 aleph verbs are due to the fact that the aleph is a silent guttural. And we looked at this before too. We looked at it back in chapter 3 about when the aleph quiesces. We talked about it in chapter 14 when we looked at the Qal perfect. Now with the Qal imperfect, we're going to have the same type of thing. Gutturals prefer A-type vowels. When the aleph is silent, quiescent, it doesn't have a vowel. The vowel before the quiescent aleph lengthens. And the accented second feminine plural and third feminine plural syllables with a aleph prefer the short E vowel. So if we look down through the chart, you notice the sade, and you unless there's excuse me, unless it is a schwa, because the sade is not a guttural, you'll see that it's got the long A vowel. It's either going to be a schwa or a long A vowel, or a couple of times there on the third feminine plural, second feminine plural, because they're identical forms. That's where we get the E vowel. So this is what that's what we're drawing to your attention here. So the three aleph gutturals prefer A-type vowels, and so we have yiktol, he will kill, matzah, yimsa rather, yimsa, uh, he will find. We see a preformative, we see no subformatives, and this is kill and this is find. So he will kill and he will find. We have the aleph, it's quiesced. It has no sound and there's no vowel there. And so that it makes absolutely no sound. Therefore, the vowel before it is going to lengthen. And so we go to this comets here instead of having the holum in the strong form above it. And we've seen that as we went through the chart. And the vowel before the silent aleph lengthens. Okay, right there. All right. So then we're ready to, yes, we're ready to look at vocabulary. We will pick it up with the one yods. That's on page 166 at 16.6. We're going to pick it up there next week. So page 176, we'll go through the vocabulary. We probably will not have time to do the vocabulary next week. Sometimes I've gone through it twice, when we've had two lessons. But I'm thinking that by the time, not that these are all really hard, we're going to look at the one yods and the one noons and that sort of thing, and geminates and that sort of thing. The one that's probably going to take us a little bit more time is going to be the reconstruction part, because we're going to be covering how do you figure out what the word is whenever you have letters dropping out and that sort of thing. And so that's what we're going to spend some time talking about next week. Okay, 1620 on 176, we have Ga'al, and that means to redeem. It's the term that's used for the kinsman redeemer, but it's all like in the book of Ruth. Boaz was a kinsman redeemer. He's the Ga'al. It's also the word that's used for the avenger of blood. Whenever somebody accidentally kills somebody and they have to flee to the city of refuge, they have to flee there because the avenger of blood, and that's the kinsman redeemer. It's the same person, the same guy. He was the one charged with the duty of executing the murderer. But if it was an accident, then he should not be executed as a murderer. It was an accident. So anyway, Ga'al is used for both of those, for the kinsman redeemer and also for the avenger of blood. Then chata is to miss the mark, and it's used for sin. And it can also be used for sin offering. You have to just go by context to know whether it's saying something is a sin or whether it's a sin offering. Yasaf, he added. And sometimes it just says he added, but it's referring to doing something again. That's why it says to do something again there. If somebody is repeating an action, it'll sometimes use Yasaf, even though it means add. And you can see Joseph in there, Yosef, because when Rachel gave birth to Joseph, she said, may he add another son. She wanted to have another child. So So you can see that in that book too. Yarash, it either means to take possession or to dispossess. And again, you have to look at the context and says, well, the sons of Israel dispossessed Sihon, the king at Heshbon, or it may be that so that they may have dispossessed or they possessed this land as Joshua led them into the land. You'll see the same word Yarash used. If it's referring to the ones who were defeated, they were dispossessed. If it's referring to the ones who won the war, it's saying that they are taking possession, their possession. So it's possess or dispossess. Kafar means to cover. It's also the word for atonement. It's also the word that's used. Kaporet is related to that. That's what's often translated as a mercy seat, but it's actually, there's nothing about mercy in it. There's nothing about seat in it. It's actually atonement cover. That's what we call the mercy seat is. Nata, to stretch out. It can be a tent, or sometimes it talks about the Lord's arm being stretched out in judgment. Nata. Azav means to abandon or forsake. Karav means to come near, to approach. It says over there, the HI, that's the he feel, that's cause. So if you cause it to come near, if you cause it to draw near, that means you're bringing it. That's used a lot for like bringing a sacrifice or a gift to the altar. You bring it, you cause it to come near. That's how Hebrew works that. Rabbah is much. If you say Todah Rabbah, it's many thanks. Rabbah, and it can also be used to mean to multiply. It's to become numerous or to be numerous, to increase. And then Shatah is to drink. Kaf it says hand, I would say palm. Kaf is a palm if it's used for both hands and feet. So if it's talking about hand and it says kaf, so hand would be yod. And if it says kaf, it's referring to the palm of the hand. If it's referring to the foot, regel, then it's going to be the sole of the foot, kaf. The same is true for thumb. Thumb and big toe are the same word too. So they just kind of correlate those between hands and feet. So kaf would be a palm. Also, kaf is sometimes used for a bowl or a dish. Because when you think of cupping your palm to, pull some water up and drink the water out of your hand or something like that. So you'll see it used that way as well. Pei, it means mouth. Reah is a friend or a neighbor. Neged, notice it's a seglet. It's got two segols there. It's a seglet noun. Those are always accented on the first syllable. So it's neged, not neged. Neged means in front of. And then sham, that's the same word we saw earlier, talking about Hanukkah. This a miracle happened there. Sham is there. Po is here. That's it. Any questions? All right. Well, if you haven't got the Qal Imperfect Paradigm memorized, the one in 15.3 or in the 1.2.3 version that I handed out or that I've had on the screen, one or the other needs to be memorized. Continue to work on that. You can work on the chapter 16 vocabulary. Again, we probably won't go over the vocabulary again next week. I don't think we'll have time. And then when it comes to work, and we're not going to read the next chapter yet, so we don't have 17 yet. The workbook, that's another reason why this lesson was broken up this way, is because in the workbook, there's two sections for 16. There's 16A that starts on page 60, and then 16B starts on page 64. And we haven't covered those yet, so you don't have to do 16B, but you can go ahead and work on 16A then. workbook. Any questions? All right, then, we'll be done.